Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Wednesday, December 18th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, Tom, Vivek Ramaswamy has weighed in on the continuing resolution that Congress must pass in order to avoid a government shutdown. He tweeted out the following. He wrote, "I wanted to read the full bill and speak with key leaders before forming an opinion. Having done that, here's my view. It's full of excessive spending, special interest giveaways, and pork barrel politics. If Congress wants to get serious about government efficiency, they should vote no." So, Tom, Elon Musk apparently agrees. What does it mean that these two are for a government shutdown? Because that's what this means, right?
Well, they're for voting no on this. I mean, I think what Vivek was saying in that also was that this entire bill, right, could be 20 pages long. And if it just stuck to the stuff that was needed to keep the government open, it would be, I think you said 380 billion or something, but then you've got all of these add-ons, billions and billions and billions of additional dollars, including some hurricane relief, which I know, the folks in Western North Carolina are still struggling and could use. So, but he's saying that should all be voted on separately. So that's the point. And I think he has a point, actually. I mean, what happens is that, there's this dramatic buildup to the last second, and then you just jam everything on top, this big, Christmas lights and bulbs, and, they hang the Christmas tree, and then it's, 2,000 pages, and they jam it through without even knowing what's in there or most of what's in there. To appease everybody. And that's the way business has been done in Washington for a long time. It's been dysfunctional for a long time. This has become the new normal. And I think what Vivek is saying is, listen, if we're serious about streamlining government, if we're serious about government efficiency, then we have to start, we have to break this cycle of dysfunction and do things in a different way, and some would argue a more proper way, which is fund the government that needs funding to stay open. And then for all the additional stuff that people want in this bill, put those in separate bills and vote on those accordingly. But that's not what's being done here. So we'll see how it plays out.
But Carl, I mean, Tom has described properly what should happen. It'd be great. That's not what happens. That's not where we are. And we are facing this deadline. How realistic is it that anything's going to happen other than what always happens? Is it the last minute they work this out and nobody reads the bill, it passes, and we kick the can down the road?
Well, except that we've had several government shutdowns. Numerous. Starting first one, I remember Reagan was president. They've gotten ever more, dramatic, and the administration has, especially when President Obama was in office, they closed parks. When President Obama was, they closed the Lincoln Memorial, but it's always open. It's never, there's no guard there. They closed stuff that was normally open to make a point. And the politics of it, I used to write about this. So who's going to be blamed, the Congress or the president? And I came to a disquieting conclusion, which is there's a constant and a variable. The president gets blamed if he's a Republican. If it's a Democratic president, Congress gets blamed. That's kind of how, if Vivek Ramaswamy, who has no Washington experience, can break that cycle, he'll be doing something.
Well, Trump hasn't weighed in, Tom, really on this. Is he just holding back, or has he learned the lesson of the past, which is that shutdowns are bad for presidents, and as Carl says, especially bad for Republican presidents?
Yeah, I don't know why Trump hasn't weighed in yet. I mean, maybe he's playing golf or busy or otherwise occupied at the moment.
It's Christmas shopping, Tom.
You're right. I'm sure he is. But listen, it's an interesting sort of puts him in an interesting spot, right? I think he probably would prefer not to have a government shutdown. On the other hand, his handpicked head or co-head of the new Department of Government Efficiency, and as Vivek said in his post on X, they've gotten a really warm reception from folks on Capitol Hill, Republicans in particular. It is a very popular idea among the public at large, particularly Republican voters, that the government is bloated, does to spend too much money, and should work to become more efficient. And so I think Trump would support that idea also. He doesn't want to undercut the guy that he's, picked to run this agency, cut his legs out from underneath him before he even gets started. But Vivek has sort of thrown down the gauntlet here and said, look, this is an early test of whether Congress, and in particular Republicans, are really committed to the idea of decreasing spending and streamlining government and becoming more efficient and more frugal with taxpayer funds. And so it'll be interesting to see where Trump comes out on this, if and when he actually makes a statement.
Well, Carl, or maybe Tom, you and I were talking about this earlier. There is a pay raise in this CR for members of Congress, which first pay raise in over a decade, I guess. But maybe they deserve it, maybe they don't. But what do you make of giving these guys some more money?
Well, I won't weigh in on the merits of it per se, but I'll say this: Dick Durbin, senator from Tom's home state of Illinois, had a cheeky response when he was asked about by a CNN reporter. Said, your ratings are in the toilet. Nobody likes you. Everybody thinks you're doing a terrible job. Why should you get a raise? He said, well, your ratings are cut in half. Are you taking a pay cut? But it reminds me
comeback, actually.
Yeah, but it reminds me of something on a serious level, which is that, so there's this posturing going. I mentioned that, the National Park Service is closed. There's usually money to keep them open, but the executive branch, makes the pain the worst it can be. And the National Park Service has the highest, is the most popular government agency. So they close national parks. So people will pressure their member of Congress to vote to keep the government, to avoid this partial shutdown. But there's two things in the budget in this continuing resolution that I think Republicans might get some hay about and maybe get public opinion on their side. The one is you mentioned, which is the pay raise for Congress. That is never popular, even though it may be fair. It's not popular. And the other is this Global Engagement Center, which is little known, department in the State Department that until very recently wouldn't have been controversial. It's designed to set up to counter Russian disinformation. It was always Russian disinformation in foreign countries. And, so there was, the Russians put out last summer this hoax about a virus, an airborne virus, and said that the American pharma companies invented it. I can't keep track of all the crap that comes out of the Kremlin, but this agency was able to dispel that notion, or so they said. But turns out they're using it against Americans, conservatives. They funded the Global Disinformation Index, which is an Orwellian name, a British NGO, which is just basically silences anybody tries to blacklist anybody they don't believe in. They went after RealClearPolitics. I don't know what we ever did to them. And this is a universally detested effort by all the Republicans. And if you put them under sodium pentothal, half the Democrats who understand how dangerous this is to have the State Department censoring Americans. But this money's in that CR. And there are Republicans, a lot of them, who would happily close the government rather than vote for that expenditure. So the politics this time, we've just come off an election. Trump won, the Republicans won. They kept the House very narrowly, but there are some things in here that the Republican base will never go for, and that they might be able to make a case to persuade the public to not go for. But when you mentioned, and the one I just mentioned, I'm sure there's other stuff in there, Tom, like that.
Yeah, but those are the ones, again, back to Vivek, he sort of singled those out, and that one in particular. It's just sort of outrageous that bit is, those two things, right? I know Congress hasn't had a pay raise in, I think, 14 years or something like that, not even a cost of living adjustment. On the other hand, and I don't think by and large, we don't pay our Congress people a ton of money. They're not getting rich off of their salaries, although they might be doing a little insider stock trading, Nancy Pelosi, which they still manage to supplement their income. But certainly giving Congress a raise is not something that's going to be popular with the American public, certainly not in a time period where the American public is suffering the way that they've been suffering economically for the last few years. And the Global Engagement Center, as you said, Carl, I mean, it's sort of an outrage that would be one of the things that got put in here to be funded, given that they're being sued by media outlets, given their past performance, given their ties to these other groups. I mean, it's just like, we thought that maybe, when the election, when people voted, that was a win for free speech and a perhaps the death blow of the censorship regime that had sort of grown up over the past few years, and this is sort of an early indicator that maybe that's not exactly the case.
Right, guys, we're gonna have to leave it there for now. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andy Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And Tom, the House Administration Oversight Subcommittee accuses former Representative Liz Cheney of engaging in witness tampering during the January 6th House investigation. They claim the former vice chairman of the January 6th Select Committee improperly communicated with Cassidy Hutchinson, who is an ex-aide to the then Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And they recommend that the FBI investigate whether Cheney violated federal laws against secret communications with Hutchinson and whether she engaged in procuring another person to commit perjury. So bad news for Liz Cheney, I guess, but does this increase the rationale for a pardon for her?
I guess maybe. This is one of those cases where I think I saw a comment from a Democratic congresswoman that said, look, you can't criminalize doing the legislature doing its work. And this was part of its work, right? This investigative committee. That seems like a little bit of weak sauce to me, because if the allegations are true that Liz Cheney was working in conjunction directly with Cassidy Hutchinson without the consent of her lawyer to coach her on her testimony before the House committee, and that testimony turned out to be at odds with things that she had previously said, that seems like a pretty significant, serious thing that should be investigated. I don't know. I know Liz Cheney released a statement saying, "Oh, this is absurd," and claiming that she's being persecuted or whatever. But it seems to me that is something that should be investigated. We don't want our representatives doing things that are either at a minimum unethical and at a maximum illegal. And so I think it's fair game to take a look at what she did and what all the folks on the January 6th committee did, by the way, and without having this being some hysterical, they're persecuting Trump and his allies are persecuting all of their supposed enemies. I don't think that doesn't rise to that level, in my opinion.
Carl, what do you make of it? Because it's a serious charge. So if it's true, I guess it's worthy of investigation. The question is, how frivolous is it? I mean, how real is the charge, right?
The whole thing's goofy. I love Tom, but that's crazy talk. Liz Cheney is a member of Congress at the time. She sides against the president of her own party, blows up her entire political career, sides with Nancy Pelosi, decides that Donald Trump led an insurrection. It's not my own view of what happened on January 6th, but this is Liz Cheney's view. No one doubts her sincerity. And she's on this committee. She's given speeches. She endorsed Kamala Harris. She's been a political player for Democrats now for 3 years because she thinks she's so appalled what happened to her political party under Trump. So this is who she is. And this is not a criminal trial. If she suborned perjury, okay, that should be looked at. There's no real evidence for that. This witness's evidence may have changed, or excuse me, her exact phrasing may change, but this is just, what's that phrase? What did Trump call it? A witch hunt when it was aimed at him. I'm sorry. We got to move on, and we move past this. Donald Trump's talking about clemency or pardons for these January 6th defendants. That can't come soon enough for me. But let's leave poor Liz Cheney out of it. And this idea that you don't like what the witness said, so you're going to say she has to. Why does she have to go through her lawyer? Where is that in the Constitution? This whole thing is kind of. I'm not a lawyer, but these non-lawyers who are going around using this loose language to me should be more careful, especially at this time of the year.
So Carl,
Yes, sir.
you don't have a problem. I mean, should there be any sort of ethical bounds for these types of congressional investigations, or?
Yeah, but Tom, this idea of coaching witnesses, that's what they do every congressional hearing. They get these people to come up, they say, what are you going to say? Okay. And you've seen these hearings where the member of Congress, they don't even ask a question. They just berate the witness and give a speech and call them liars. And, the other day there was a hearing on Capitol Hill, and the poor bastard, I guess he's head of the post office. He put his hands over his ears. Now, that's the worst possible symbol for the post office, when they're going for funding, is to tell they want to listen to Congress. But I suppose it's the instinct of every single witness who gets berated up there. But I'm just, look, Donald Trump won, and he's been saying some very interesting things in interviews since then. That the real revenge will be we're successful again. And I just think that but meanwhile, calling for some people and staff calling for the criminalization of these people, they have two instincts. And one is to go after all the people that went after them. And I don't blame them for being angry, because I thought what was done to them was unfair. Or, the other instinct is to just get it right and get America moving again, turn the page and try to restore some normalcy to American politics.
Those things don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive, Carl.
I think they do, Tom. I think they have to I think they have to make a choice here of how they want to govern.
Well, but Carl, to be fair, Trump has said some things like that. He's also told Meet the Press earlier this month. This is the quote: "I think those people, meaning the people on the committee, committed a major crime, and Liz Cheney was behind it." He said, so was Benny Thompson. Everybody on that committee, for what they did, yeah, honestly, they should go to jail.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like you're leaving the past behind.
That's what I'm saying. I think Trump has to choose between which he wants to be. If that's the kind of president he wants to be, I don't think he's going to get to accomplish the things he wants to, the positive things. And he can even scores. And he's got a reason to be angry, but he's got to decide what he wants to do. Does he want to lead the country forward and put this kind of crap behind us, or does he want to go after the people who went after him? And where does that end? Then when the next administration goes after him, there's this spiral of vengeance. It'll turn our politics into the Middle East. I really think that that's not the right instinct here.
Well, Tom, I want to go back to the question of a pardon, because this is the kind of thing that certain Democrats have been talking about as being the reason why we need this preemptive pardon. And Liz Cheney is a person who's on that list, along with other prominent Democrats. She's not a Democrat, of course, but other prominent politicians, I guess. So does this add impetus to that argument? And do you expect to see pardons?
It might. I expect to see more pardons from Biden. As I've said before, I think he's going to end up pardoning other members of his family, as he did for Hunter. And, there has been a lot of discussion about preemptively pardoning all of the folks on Trump's enemies list. And that would certainly include Liz Cheney, among many others. I think they're seriously considering it. I don't know if ultimately he'll end up doing it or not, but I think they're very seriously considering it. If you force me to bet on it, I'd probably say they will, just because given how Biden has conducted himself post-election, the pardons he's already issued, it would not surprise me one bit if he did that on his way out the door.
Well, Carl, you're going to take that bet? That's a good one.
No, I think that's going to happen. I do. He's signaled as much. It's hard to see how these pardons. You're pardoning people who've never even been charged with a crime and accused of something that I don't even think is a crime. My guess is Biden's going to issue more pardons, but I think it's going to be an artistic effort to try and figure out how to phrase those.
Well, you know what? This is an odd moment of agreement on the three of us. I actually think he's going to pardon people as well. I think that since he pardoned Hunter and then these 1,500 other people, including people who pretty outrageous crimes they had committed, I think that it's likely that yeah they're going to follow through with more, and it will be just as they're going out the door, and they don't really care. I think
Yeah,
that's what I hear.
I'm gonna be talking to Eric Spitz later. I have him in here and talk about. He's a friend, went to college with Hunter Biden and knew Bo Biden in college too. I'm gonna ask. He wrote a column for us saying that he applauded Biden for pardoning Hunter because he's his father, but that doesn't. He's not Liz Cheney's father, so that logic doesn't necessarily apply to everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll be right back after that. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon, Tom Bevan. Don't go away. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And guys, Rahm Emmanuel had a piece in the Washington Post that caught a lot of people's attention and was on the front page of Real Clear Politics. He wrote in part this. He wrote, "Far from draining the swamp, Trump and his administration will soon be bathing in it. We need to reveal the populist Trump as a plutocrat. The hypocrisy will be there in the upcoming tax legislation and slashed regulations for the powerful, all paid for by the middle class." So Rahm Emanuel is positioning himself as having some answers about how the Democrats can make a comeback. Carl, what did you make of the article, and what do you think Rahm Emanuel is up to here?
Well, wouldn't it be exciting if he ran for president? He was White House chief of staff. He was in the leadership in the House. Now he's currently the ambassador to Japan.
Ran the DNC.
He ran the DNC. He's a former dancer. I think he served in the IDF. He's a kind of a
And
renaissance.
he's our ambassador to Japan, of course.
Well, I just said that. and he's known for, when he worked in the White House as a young aide for Bill Clinton, he was known for his spectacular swearing. I overheard him once use the F word as an adjective, noun, and verb in the same sentence. So he's not. And Tom remembers him his time in Mayor in Chicago. He's an interesting thinker. That stuff you talked about, Andy, about the middle class and how Trump's tax cuts are going to help the rich. That's sort of common Democratic pattern. What Trump would say and has said is that his tax cuts are going to help put people back to work and help manufacturing and help the middle class. Rahm Emanuel there is sort of falling into the old trap of the Democrat who likes jobs but doesn't like employers. Having said that, he had some harsh words for Democrats in there. He said, we didn't meet the moment. He said, the country's angry right now. And sweetness and light and the politics of joy wasn't going to cut it. And he further said that people have a right to be angry and that they've lost faith in institutions. Now, he named two sources. One was the bailout, had an evocative phrase in there, said we should have exacted Old Testament justice on the bankers who screwed up the economy, in 2007, 2008. And he mentioned the Iraq War of 2003. And so, he's saying that we need to understand why working people are angry, and we need to address their concerns. And we can't do it by talking about, transgender rights and using words like Latinx, that this echo chamber he talked about among academic liberals alienated several of the Democrats' core constituencies. So it was a message. It was tough love, and I too wonder what he's up to, because a candidate who actually takes this and runs with it, to me, is going to get the Democrats back more close to where they need to be.
Tom, what did you make of the article? And you put it on the front page. Why did you put it on the front page?
Well, because Rahm's a player in the Democratic Party, and it was in the Washington Post, so it's obviously going to get a lot of attention. And he's getting talked about. People are mentioning his name now that he's coming back from Japan. I saw a headline about him running for president. He's sort of quietly testing the waters He's seen as someone who might be able to get the Democrats back on track. He's done that before. I mean, when he ran the DNC, he famously went out and recruited a bunch of veterans and non-politicians in 2000. I think it was 2006, and they had a great midterm that year. He was also, I think, when he was chief of staff to Obama, famously said, never let a crisis go to waste. That was him. So he's a savvy political operator. And he is, I mean, the thing that people forget, or they don't forget, but like he has accrued a little bit of baggage. When he was mayor of Chicago, he sort of, I don't want to say run out of town, but he certainly got on the, he covered up the shooting of Laquan McDonald and the police department. It was a brutal shooting. I think he was shot 16 times. And Rahm, it almost, basically scuttled his political career as the mayor of Chicago. So this would be a sort of a comeback for him, but he is not well liked among the progressives for that reason. But to Carl's point, it seems like the pendulum might be shifting, away from progressives and back to the middle. And that's where Rahm Emmanuel lives. I mean, that's where he sort of has made his bones as a Democrat and a political operative over. So who knows? I mean, maybe there's a chance for him, but I certainly think that this op-ed is solid advice. I mean, everything he says in here is exactly right. He said, and one of the lines that jumped out to me, he said, "We can no longer tiptoe around the issues that have people worried. Crime, immigration, homelessness, and a fentanyl crisis rise are understandably on the minds of millions. When carjackings are up and everything in pharmacies is locked down, you can't recite crime statistics to deny people's everyday experiences." And that's exactly what Democrats did during this election cycle. And I think he's right. If they continue to do that, they're going to continue to pay a price at the polls.
But, just to play devil's advocate, is it a little bit, first of all, it's easy to talk about this kind of thing. And I thought there was some good advice in the article, but there was a lot of sort of pablum as well, or just sort of like,
You were not impressed,
Andy.
Andy.
He's a politician. Are you shocked?
Yeah, well, and that's the second thing is, he's not proved to be that great. He's a great operator, great advisor, great thinker. I'll give him credit for all that sort of stuff. But his time in Chicago was not sort of a good time. He didn't leave there sort of. He went back into private life, right? So is a little too much Back to the Future, Carl. I mean, he's sort of it's an Obama retread. Is that really what the Democrats need going forward?
Yeah, look, you make some valid points, but just look at politics is a game it's a very personal. It's very personal. People want to like their president. Rahm Emmanuel had some rough edges. He's grown older. He's grown smarter, but he's got more charisma than J.B. Pritzker. I mean, it's going to have to be somebody. Everybody that we mentioned, and where this is going, both of you.
Oh my God, here we go. Go ahead.
I mean, the most charismatic person they have is Gavin Newsom. But anytime people talk about Gavin Newsom, they say, all right, but he signed these laws that his super majority, super progressive, super, woke legislature passed. He's vetoed a couple of them too, but one of them was, California be a sanctuary city for kids, minors, for their parents, who want to undergo transgender conversion. I don't even know what the right nomenclature is. But,
surgery.
Yeah, and there, of course, it cropped up immediately. There's a custody battle. The father doesn't want the thing. The mother does. She moves to California. So anybody, and I bring up that one example. Anybody we name is going to have baggage. There's no perfect person. There's no Franklin Roosevelt out there. And of course, we're so hypercritical today. I don't mean the three of us, but in our current political culture, if somebody mentioned Franklin Roosevelt, but he's in a wheelchair. How can a guy like that be president? Well, nobody's perfect. There's no perfect candidate. But this is a voice, Rahm Emmanuel, who's won elections. He's raised money for the party. He's run a big Midwestern city. He's an accomplished person in their party, and he's telling them we need to go in a different direction. So maybe he isn't the perfect vehicle, Andy. Maybe he isn't the guy. But I think some of what he said, and especially what Tom underscored about crime, just cannot be dismissed.
Well, I would disagree with you on one thing, which is I do think people would accept a president in a wheelchair today. I think that we've come a long way in that regard. But
Well, they did
Tom,
then, but so I don't really mean that. What I meant
Yeah,
was we tend to just
they
focus
didn't
on
know
the
it, did
fault,
they?
was fault of the guy or the woman. We don't, you know, I was making a comment not about intolerance, but rather about how the media approach now is to single out the worst thing somebody did in their career, and that's what we want to talk about. And when it comes to Rahm Emmanuel or Gavin Newsom or these other, or Kamala Harris, these other people, they've had rich careers, they've done a lot, and so and in Rahm's case, he's been, he's an ambassador, he's been a mayor, he's been a chief of staff, he's been in the House. He's got the best resume in the party.
Tom, you see it that way?
Well, I mean, he's certainly a distinguished guy, and he has done a lot of different jobs within the party and done them mostly successfully. So I think he has as good a claim to, being on a debate stage with anybody in the party in terms of if he decides to try and, give it a go to run for president.
We just have a few minutes left in this segment. And Tom, I wanted to talk to you about Justin Trudeau. He's Prime Minister of Canada, obviously.
Wait, Governor Trudeau?
Yeah, but his popularity has taken quite a beating. I just saw these new polling numbers. He started out about a 63% approval rating. It's down to 28% right now. That's even worse than President Biden is. But Biden's at about 40%, I guess, right now. So, what's the future hold for Justin Trudeau?
Well, as far as his political career goes, he's approaching the blackness. I think he's holding on by a thread. I mean, I think he's going to end up resigning fairly soon. I mean, it's just been an absolute mess for him. And it all kind of started with this, visit to Trump and Trump sort of trolling him and making fun of him, this idea of imposing tariffs. And then he had his finance minister resign right before she was supposed to present their budget. And then the next person in line, when it came to them, they resigned. And he walked into Parliament and just sort of dropped this thing off and then left. And then you had the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, stand up and give this speech, this amazing speech, which we put on the front page of RealClearPolitics. I mean, it's 5 minutes long. Everybody should watch it, making the case, about, he was talking about folks that he had met in Canada and the economic hardship that they've been suffering. And so, look, I think Justin Trudeau is got one foot out the door, and I will be surprised if he manages to last very much longer, because that's how bad it's going for him and his party right now in Canada.
Carl, he's been a fixture on the Canadian scene for so long. I think he's led the party for like 12 years. He's been prime minister for 9, I believe. What would Canada look like post Trudeau? Is that it's hard to even imagine.
Well, it might be a little less woke, I mean, I think Trudeau started getting in trouble when they cracked down really harshly on these truckers and farmers who invaded the capital and treated them like domestic terrorists. And they were demonstrators. And then when they actually had domestic terrorists, lynching Jews in effigy and doing all these things, they treated like kid gloves. And I think people started to wonder
He
about,
was busy dancing at a Taylor Swift concert or
his
something.
priorities. Yeah, that happened a couple of weeks ago. He was dancing badly at a Taylor Swift concert while there were riots in Montreal. He seems to have, the culture seems to have shifted. The pendulum swung back.
He should have just,
and he hasn't gone with it.
He should have done the Trump.
He
would have been fine.
Yeah, and and these jokes about Canada being the 51st state, that doesn't help him. Although I hasten to say that it can't be the 51st state, because that's got to be Puerto Rico, and then Greenland should be the 52nd state. That was the best idea Donald Trump ever had. So Canada can be the 53rd state, I suppose, but apparently Justin Trudeau is not going to be its governor.
Is Justin Trudeau is he the Gavin Newsom of Canada? I mean, or is Gavin Newsom the Justin Trudeau of California?
That was a trick question. The answer is neither.
I would say it's the other way around, or the latter, I should say, Andy.
Which is, I forget the order of my question.
Gavin Newsom is the Justin Trudeau of Canada. Look, Justin Trudeau, as you said, he's led the country for 9 years. It has been a very sort of woke regime up there, and the further that's gone along, the less popular he's gotten, and it's obviously compounded with COVID and with the economic situation as it has in the United States. And that's why I think Gavin Newsom, as slick and charismatic as he is, Carl, I think, he's got a record of policies and passing laws that I think is the country has just moved in a different direction. Now, maybe after, the next 4 years, it'll be ready to embrace Gavin Newsom and some of his more progressive policies. But right now they're headed in the opposite direction.
Maybe Gavin is the Ronald Reagan of the Democratic Party, waiting in the wings to come out of California to save us all.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, guys. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been talking with Carl and Tom. Don't go away. We'll be back after this.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics, talking now with Eric Spitz, who's a friend of the show and a friend of Real Clear. He's written another column for us, and this one's interesting because the Hunter Biden pardon, got a lot written about it, but not by people who know Hunter Biden personally, or who have a nuanced view. And Eric fits both of those descriptions. Eric, just tell our viewers and our listeners what you think is the primary thing that they should keep in mind when evaluating whether President Biden did the right thing or the wrong thing in pardoning his son.
I think they should keep in mind that Hunter is a person who is an addict, who went through difficult times. He has paid the price. It might not look pretty in the sense that you can always go back into history and show where he fell. In fact, he did it himself. He wrote a tell-all book that I read, and it's gory. It's no holds barred. He talks about everything, and after reading it, you don't really end up feeling sorry for him as much as you understand that there's somebody who thinks differently than, say, normal. And I've seen that personally. I've had family members in the grips of addiction, and it changes them. It's a very powerful, overwhelming force.
Now, tell our listeners, you've known Hunter Biden all your adult life. Where'd you two meet?
We met near to the first few weeks of college. I met his brother
at
Bo
Penn?
at the University of Pennsylvania. I met his brother Bo on the first day of school. He was my next door neighbor in the quad. And that meant I met Hunter pretty soon thereafter. They were pretty tight. I would imagine that the years that they were in college were probably the least tight that they were in their lives. I know afterwards they were extremely tight, and I know before that they're Irish twins.
So yeah. So what did you notice about Hunter Biden in those days that all these years later going to inform, what did you notice that made you, was there anything that you saw that he was going to have the kind of problems he developed? What was he like as a young man?
He was a hothead. I put that in my essay. He was the protector of his brother. His brother was he didn't drink in college.
Bo was a straight arrow.
He was a straight arrow.
Yeah.
And but he was a funny guy. He was popular. He was part of the in crowd.
I interviewed Bo once, and I found him very charismatic, very, very appealing person, and less like Hunter and Joe Biden. He didn't brag a lot. He was a more, I don't say normal, it's not the correct word, a more contained person, in some ways a more serious person. That was your impression?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was a serious person. That's a great way to describe him as a college student. Imagine that you're going to school with someone who's a serious person, but he's cracking jokes in the back of the room and he's trying to make everybody laugh. But you know, he's at the time he knew that he was the one to take the family reins.
Now there's a couple of I'm talking here. Let me to Eric Spitz, who former owner, co-owner of the Orange County Register and frequent a contributor to RealClearPolitics. Grew up in the East, but has lived in California for some time. Eric, you write about the transactional nature of today's politics in a way that I wasn't entirely convinced. I edited that piece, but I wanted you to have your say. But explain to me why you think that Joe Biden felt that this is okay to do in today's environment, despite saying he wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that saying he would and then changing his mind was a mistake. There's no doubt that if he had to do it over again, he wouldn't have, kind of gone back on his word. That said, the reason that he did it is because the idea of not doing it was unimaginable. And that's what I mean by transactional nature. It's not just politics, it's our world. Everything is associated with or can get boiled down to a yes no decision. And then that decision can get analyzed over and over and over again. And it does. And that's what I mean by the transactional nature, in the sense that what was the choices? It was either A or B. And if he chose B, which is not to pardon his son, he would have gone down in history as a laughingstock.
Hmm. You think that? Yeah, you think he would have paid a price either way. That's an interesting way to think about it. All right, let's get into that a little more. So he made pretty unequivocally said he wouldn't do it, and his press secretary was even more unequivocal. Wouldn't pardon his son. Wouldn't interfere. Would let the criminal justice system play out. I wonder when he first said that he was intending to run for re-election. Karine Jean-Pierre was repeating it after Kamala Harris was the nominee. Was there some thought that Harris would do it? I don't think Biden expected Donald Trump to win the election. And did Trump's winning the election change the equation for them? I'm asking you to speculate, really, but it'd be informed speculation because you know the family.
I'm going to take it off the board. I think that he did it after a weekend with Hunter, where Hunter had a cudgel to lay on his father, which is, I'm sober. And if you want me to stay sober, I need some help.
Well, that'd be tough. Look, you're a parent. I'm a parent. We think we do almost anything for our kids. And to see your child go to prison, even if you made a promise to the country and meant it at the time, sitting there now facing it, it's imminent. It could happen any month. Federal prison. Hunter Biden might have gone in and done his time, might have come out a stronger guy, but you don't know that. And to think Joe Biden's 82, to think of him passing away, being on his deathbed, and Hunter in prison, I think a normal person ought to be able to empathize with him. And if you can't empathize with that, I'd submit you're just too partisan for your own good. You agree with that?
I would agree. I also think it's pretty easy to get around the addiction conversation and to understand that people do things when they are under the influence of catastrophic forces that they can't control. And should they be held accountable? Yes. To my mind, he was held quite accountable relative to the crimes that he committed, say if he were someone else that didn't have the Biden last name.
You that's true, but that cuts both ways. If he didn't have the Biden last name, some Ukrainian, energy company wouldn't have paid him millions of dollars to be on their board. He doesn't speak Ukraine. He doesn't speak the language. He knows nothing about the energy business. I mean, he traded on the name, and then when it all hit the fan, he and the president said, "Oh, but he wouldn't be on their scrutiny except if he had my name." And it seemed to me that they want it both ways.
Oh, that's not my point. My point is he paid the price already. So he paid more of a price than he would normally have paid had he not been the president's son. So therefore, when
Yeah,
the
but
president
yeah,
wants
but
to
wait a
come
minute,
back
but
and
wait a
pardon
minute.
him,
That gun charge wouldn't have been brought against somebody else, probably. But
correct.
you know, not paying your taxes because you were hiding money you got from Ukraine. Well, Paul
He
Manafort
paid
went
the
to
money back,
Paul,
which
Paul, Man,
ultimately,
Paul Manafort went to prison for the same crime. I mean, I guess what people say, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, Eric. You and I are friends, but what I'm trying to say is that I think people think he didn't pay the price. I think
fair enough.
he got off, in the end without paying his dues.
Again, I would suggest that that's a matter of degree, right? He paid a price. Do you think it was enough? I don't know. Maybe I think it's enough and you don't think it's enough, but he definitely paid a price.
Well, look,
And
yeah, that's right. Keep going. Sorry.
and the point is that what we're not continuing to consider is that he was in the throes of addiction. Paul Manafort wasn't.
Well, he may have been addicted to something else. Yeah, I hear you. Um, here's the one thing, and your column wasn't about this. I'm not one of these people who, I'll review a book and say, this author, his book's okay, but he really should have written about this, because I don't think that's fair. And you were addressing what you've been talking about. But there is this other matter I want to ask you about, because you pay attention to politics so closely. And that is, all right, let's just say, let's stipulate, just for the purpose of this question, that Joe Biden meant what he said and then changed his mind for the most human of reasons. He's a father. And that's kind of where I lean. But the Democrats and the friends of the Biden and some of these liberals and commentators on MSNBC and CNN, they went and rode with this for a year and just beat the living crap out of Donald Trump and the Republicans. And they said, this Biden won't even pardon his own son. This shows what it really means to be presidential. This shows how corrupt and rotten Donald Trump is, and what a contrast he is to this wonderful president who wouldn't even pardon his own son. That, I think, has left a bad taste in people's mouth.
And I would blame the reporters who wrote a bad story.
Well,
Because
it was these commentators.
story about
Wait.
something that isn't done yet.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, yeah, I hear you, but they weren't just reporters. They were these commentators on the cable, the talking heads.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I blame them. I think that's a function of seeing the story half full or half done and declaring victory. He didn't ultimately make the choice that they gave him credit for, so they shouldn't have given him credit for it.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. All right. You've been listening to Eric Spitz, former owner of the Orange County Register and a columnist, an activist in so many different intriguing areas. And I urge you to read his piece. It's on our page on Real Clear Politics on Wednesday, December 18th. You've been listening to RCP on SiriusXM Radio or on our podcast. We urge you to come back again tomorrow, same time, 3 p.m. on the radio in California, where Eric lives, 6 p.m. here in the East. Or you can go to our site and find our podcast and download it, or just listen to it anytime you want. Good evening.